Sea moves with rhythm and grace, but its calm can shatter without warning. In this video, you'll witness 6 harrowing stories of sudden marine attacks, encounters with predators that show no mercy. From a Navy diver struck mid-rescue and a family circled by orcas, to a peaceful boogie-boarding adventure turned almost fatal, these stories show us how quickly control can vanish at sea. The sun rose high over the Strait of Gibraltar on July 17, 2025, casting a golden sheen across the ocean's rolling surface. The Carrington family, Elliot, a 45-year-old software executive, his wife Lena, 42, and their 2 children, Mia, 16, and Jamie, 12, had taken time off for a luxurious summer voyage aboard their recently purchased $2 million yacht, the Solstice, in calm waters. A promising forecast, the day had begun like a dream. As the yacht sliced through the open sea, Elliot stood at the helm while Lena sunbathed at the bow. Mia scrolled through music selections inside the cabin while Jamie tossed snacks to a few curious gulls hovering above. Around midday, the first strange thump echoed through the lower deck, subtle enough to pass unnoticed. But moments later, a harder jolt struck the yacht's side, followed by the sound of water sloshing in the bilge beneath the cabin. Elliot turned sharply, scanning the surface. In the distance, slick black dorsal fins cut through the water, slowly converging on the yacht. A pod of orcas, 6, maybe 7, swam in a wide arc around them. At first, their movements appeared curious, even playful. One swam parallel to the hull, tilting its head to peer upward before diving below. Another bumped the stern with the side of its body, a thud resonating through the steel. The rudder jerked briefly under Elliot's hands. He adjusted the course slightly, but the yacht resisted. The steering had grown sluggish. Below deck, a warning light blinked red. Rudder integrity compromised. He called out to Lena, who joined him at the stern just as another orca rubbed against the hull, this time cracking a fiberglass panel near the waterline. A soft but persistent leak began seeping into the engine compartment. Water pumps kicked on. Mia emerged, alarmed by the vibrations, while Jamie clutched the rail, wide-eyed. The orcas tightened their circle, churning the surface as their white patches flashed between waves. The yacht, though still afloat, began to feel increasingly small. Elliot sent a distress signal to the nearest marine channel. A vessel responded, a fishing boat 10 miles away, already turning toward them. But the orcas seemed agitated now, reacting to the signals, the electronic hum, or perhaps just the shifting energy on board. One of the larger bulls rammed the stern again, harder this time, jarring the yacht and nearly throwing Jamie off his feet. That was the moment Elliot made the call. They needed to abandon ship. The family grabbed flotation vests and an emergency raft, but before they could fully deploy it, another violent jolt knocked the device overboard. With the orcas circling and the yacht slowly taking on water, they had no choice but to slip into the sea together, holding hands as they dropped from the side. The water was colder than expected, the salt biting at their eyes and mouths as they struggled to stay close. Lena was the first to feel the rush of water as something enormous moved beneath her. A sleek body brushed past her thigh, then another. She barely had time to process the motion before one of the orcas surged upward beneath her, grabbing her leg in its massive jaws. The force of the lunge yanked her underwater, thrashing her violently back and forth. Bubbles rose as the sea swallowed her scream. She surfaced seconds later, blood trailing from her calf and thigh, skin shredded in long slashes, her face pale with shock. The orca let go but lingered nearby, circling again. Mia screamed, though her voice was drowned by wind and waves. She kicked desperately toward her mother, but another orca came from the side, rising with chilling precision. Its jaws clamped around her right arm, dragging her beneath the surface. The girl's body vanished in a spiral of white foam. When she was released, she surfaced screaming, her arm torn, bruised, and barely usable. Elliot caught her and wrapped his free arm around her shoulder. Pulling her close, his blood spread in cloudy ribbons around them. The pod grew frenzied. Whether stirred by blood or motion, 2 orcas began slapping their tails near the family, creating concussive waves. The animals showed no fear, only coordination and brutal strength. Jamie, wide-eyed and shaking, floated beside his father, clutching a broken piece of foam as a makeshift board. Another orca rose beneath him, lifting him out of the water on its back before twisting suddenly, flinging the boy off and into the waves. Elliot swam to him as fast as he could, pulling him back, lungs burning from exertion and panic. Lena was drifting now, in and out of consciousness, the wound on her leg growing darker, the blood thicker. The injured Mia clung to Elliot's arm, teeth chattering. The pod slowed again, forming a circle just out of reach, dorsal fins slicing rhythmically, like they were calculating the next approach. The waiting stretched out horribly. The sea felt endless. The yacht, now several hundred meters away, listed at the stern but was still visible. Suddenly, a new engine noise pierced the air, a distant rumble that grew louder. A white fishing vessel appeared on the horizon, accelerating toward them. One of the orcas surged between the boat and the family, but the roar of the engine disrupted its rhythm. The others backed away, regrouping as the ship veered closer, casting a frothy wake across the sea. A crew of 3 leaned over the side, throwing lines and lifebuoys into the water, shouting directions they could barely hear. Elliot grabbed a rope with one hand, clutching Jamie with the other as the fishermen hauled them aboard. Another rope looped around Mia and pulled her up. Lena was barely able to grasp hers, but the crew reached down and hauled her out bodily, the open gash on her leg still leaking blood across the deck. They lay there, gasping, soaked and shaking, while the fishing crew applied pressure to wounds and offered dry towels. The orcas faded into the blue, vanishing as quickly as they had arrived, their sleek backs disappearing beneath the waves. The yacht eventually returned to port under tow. It suffered minor structural damage but remained intact. Yet the Carringtons would never forget the encounter. The brutal precision, the eerie intelligence, the raw force of the pod, it had changed everything. They had stepped into the sea as observers. By the time they left it, they knew they had trespassed. The shoreline at Maui's Keawakapu Beach shimmered under the mid-morning sun, its pale sands warmed by the steady rhythm of the waves. Tourists sprawled on towels, surfers waited just beyond the break, and kids dashed in and out of the shallows, laughing beneath the endless blue sky. Among them was 12-year-old Eli Sanderson, a lean, wiry boy with sunburned cheeks and tangled salt-blonde hair, paddling out on his neon-green boogie board. Eli had been in the water for nearly 40 minutes, drifting just beyond the waist-deep breakers. His mother, Serena, stood watching from a shaded spot under a rented umbrella, her eyes occasionally breaking from her book to track the bobbing board. Eli was confident, full of energy, and happiest when in the ocean. That morning the water was unusually clear, the reef below visible in patches between the soft rolling waves. Then, without warning, the sea changed. From the edge of the cove, a shadow moved fast, low, sleek, and purposeful, closing in from the left. Eli didn't see it coming. A dark flash broke the surface and slammed into the side of his board with terrifying force, snapping the silence of the morning with a loud crack of impact. The boogie board jerked sideways, pulling Eli into the water with it. His leash, wrapped tightly around his ankle, snapped violently as the entire board was wrenched underwater. In an instant, Eli was gone. On shore, Serena stood up, heart freezing in her chest as the green board vanished and a splash bloomed unnaturally wide. She couldn't scream. Not yet. Not when she didn't know. Not when she hoped he might still pop back up laughing. 6 seconds passed. Beneath the surface, Eli flailed in the spinning darkness, pulled downward by a brutal force that gripped his board and dragged him briefly in a spiral. His leg hit something rough, and a flash of pain bloomed from his upper thigh. His ears rang as pressure crushed against his chest, lungs burning as he kicked free of the leash remnant now tangled around his foot. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the hold loosened. The forces released, the water stilled, the pain stayed. He surged upward, limbs thrashing. Eli broke the surface with a gasp, sputtering seawater and adrenaline. The green board was gone. In its place was a circle of foamy red that spread around him like smoke. His right thigh throbbed violently, and when he looked down, he saw the wound, long, curved, and gaping across his leg, oozing red and deep enough to show layers of torn muscle beneath shredded skin. On the beach, lifeguards had already started running. A veteran named Dane, tall and muscular with sun-leathered skin, hit the surf first. Another followed close behind, throwing a rescue buoy ahead of him. Serena screamed now, full voice, eyes locked on the blood in the water as people began to clear the beach. Eli tried to swim, but each kick felt like fire. The salt stung inside the cut, and the dizziness crept in too fast. He drifted into the shallows just as Dane reached him, throwing the boy's arm over his shoulder and hauling him upright. The second guard grabbed the other side, and together they dragged him toward shore, waves pushing at their backs. Blood streaked behind them, a long red trail pulled out with the tide. The tiger shark was gone, but not far. A fisherman on a paddleboard near the point spotted the animal minutes later, a 10-foot silhouette circling slowly beneath the surface, looping through the same area where Eli had floated only moments before. It moved with eerie calm, not frenzied or fast, but curious, deliberate, almost calculating. On land, lifeguards laid Eli on a towel while bystanders offered water and shade. A tourniquet had already been applied. His thigh was open to the bone in one place, flesh dangling in thick flaps. His mother knelt beside him, sobbing as she pressed his hand to her chest. His skin was pale, his lips blue at the edges, and his eyes were fluttering as shock overtook him. The paramedics arrived within minutes. He was stabilized, bundled, and carried away from the beach as tourists stood in stunned silence. The scene felt unreal. How fast it had happened, how close it had been. How the water now looked so innocent again, as if nothing had broken through its smooth surface. In the emergency room, Eli underwent a long surgery. Doctors cleaned the wound, removed damaged tissue, and began to close the gash with more than 80 stitches. A large skin graft was needed to replace the destroyed area on his upper thigh. Miraculously, there had been no tendon or artery severed, just deep muscle damage and a brutal tear that would take weeks to heal. The bite had been exploratory, a single clamp and release, typical of a tiger shark testing an unfamiliar object. Marine experts confirmed the species based on the pattern of the bite, the spacing of the wounds, and the reports from nearby fishermen. The shark was likely a juvenile, big enough to cause massive injury, but not yet large enough to attack a full-grown seal or turtle. The bright green board, the kicking legs, and the reflective leash had made Eli look like something worth investigating. Local authorities closed the beach for 72 hours, and aerial drones were used to scan the coastline. The tiger shark was spotted again near the rocky point the following day, swimming just beyond the reef's edge. No culling was ordered. Hawaiian law and local culture emphasized respect for marine life, but signs were posted and warnings were shared with every new visitor. The attack rippled through the community. It had happened too close to shore, in water that most considered safe. Eli had not been surfing far out or swimming in isolation. He had simply been boogie boarding in the same shallow waves that dozens of other kids played in daily. For locals, it shattered an illusion of safety. For tourists, it was a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability. Eli spent nearly 2 weeks in the hospital and months in recovery. He couldn't walk without help for a while, and the scars would remain for life. But he survived, and slowly he began to speak about it, not as something to fear, but as something to understand. The ocean had always been his second home, but that day it reminded everyone watching that it belonged to something older, stronger, and never fully tamed. Petty Officer Second Class Travis Malone moved steadily through the clear blue waters off the coast of Key West, the morning sun cutting rays through the ocean above him. At 31, he was lean, disciplined, and deeply respected among his Navy peers, a rescue swimmer known for calm under pressure and precise control underwater. That day's dive was part of a routine coastal training exercise, meant to simulate rescue scenarios under moderate currents and visibility. The water was warm, visibility was fair, and all protocols had been strictly followed. He and his dive partner, Petty Officer Adrian Keller, were returning toward the mooring buoy after completing a simulated victim retrieval drill. The two had surfaced several yards apart, floating calmly in formation, waiting for their support boat to approach. Travis kicked slowly toward the buoy, his movements deliberate, scanning for the boat's outline through the rippling water ahead. Without warning, the sea beneath him split open. From directly below, a massive shape rose fast, silent, unseen, and devastatingly precise. A bull shark, thick-bodied and easily 8 feet long, surged upward and clamped down on Travis's right thigh with explosive force. The impact knocked the air from his lungs, and in the span of a second, his body twisted sideways, his leg locked in the shark's crushing jaws. There was no time to think, only pain. The shark shook once violently before releasing him. Travis didn't see where it went. The water erupted in a cloudy bloom of red, spreading in wide, spiraling arcs around him. His legs screamed with pain as he tried to push toward the surface, barely able to move, his right thigh useless and limp, the wetsuit torn and leaking blood in thick ribbons. Keller saw it all from 20 feet away. He sprint-kicked toward his partner, dropping a hand to the utility belt at his waist. With a single motion, he grabbed the bang stick, an emergency shark deterrent loaded with a single-shot round, and swept it through the water in front of him, ready to strike again if the shark returned. He reached Travis just as the blood cloud thickened. Travis's face was pale, his breathing fast and ragged. The bite had shredded through muscle and skin, exposing sinew and bone. A deep groove ran dangerously close to his femoral artery, blood pumping with each rapid heartbeat. Keller grabbed him under the arms, holding tight, kicking hard toward the support boat now racing in from the edge of the training perimeter. The rescue crew dropped the ladder into the water and pulled the two men aboard in a flurry of motion, blood splashing across the deck as Travis was lowered onto his back. Tourniquet applied high on the thigh. Gauze pressed deep into the wound. The nearest corpsman called for an airlift immediately as the boat accelerated toward the shoreline, sirens already sounding from the naval dock ahead. Within 15 minutes, Travis was loaded onto a medical chopper and rushed to the nearest naval hospital, his pulse thready and his skin slick with sweat. In the operating room, surgeons worked fast, removing shredded muscle, cleaning debris from the bite, and stitching around the torn artery where the shark's teeth had grazed within millimeters of a fatal hit. Hours later, Travis was stabilized, weak, heavily sedated, but alive. The investigation that followed revealed what the dive team hadn't known. Earlier that morning, a private fishing charter had been operating less than a mile away, dumping unused bait fish into the sea after a failed deep-sea session. The slick of blood and fish scraps had drifted south with the current, straight into the Navy's training sector. The scent trail had likely attracted the bull shark, a notoriously aggressive and territorial species known to patrol the coastal waters of Florida year-round. The Navy responded immediately. All nearshore training operations were halted pending review. Area sonar sweeps and coordinated marine patrols were added to future dive protocols. Charts were remapped, zones reassessed, and buffer distances from known recreational activity zones were doubled. What had once been routine now required deeper planning, stronger oversight, and an acknowledgement that the ocean's unpredictability could never be underestimated. Back in the hospital, Travis faced a long recovery. The damage to his leg was extensive, multiple layers of tissue torn, nerves impacted, and mobility compromised. He endured 3 surgeries in total, first to stabilize, then to reconstruct, and finally to graft and preserve the integrity of what remained. Weeks turned to months. Physical therapy became his new training regimen, painful, slow, but relentless. The incident struck hard across the Atlantic Fleet. Rescue swimmers across East Coast installations were briefed on the attack, new training videos were recorded, and protocols adjusted for both routine drills and real-world rescue deployments. Travis's injury became a sobering example of how fast control could be lost, even with top-tier training and preparation. Despite the trauma, Travis remained composed. He spoke to junior trainees through video feeds during rehab, reminding them not just of the ocean's power, but also of the importance of being prepared for the unexpected, which could happen anywhere, even during a drill. He refused to blame the sea or the shark. The bull had responded to instinct, not malice. It had struck and vanished, an act of pure, natural violence. Months later, Travis returned to the naval base in Key West to meet the men who'd pulled him from the water. They shook his hand, some in silence, others offering brief words. The sea looked calm that day, blue, beautiful, and indifferent. Training resumed weeks after with new measures in place, but the memory of that attack stayed sharp. Travis didn't dive again, not right away, but he stood on the dock and watched as the next team hit the water. His leg bore thick scars now, his gait slower, but his mind as focused as ever. What happened beneath him that morning was quick, brutal, and almost final. But he had survived, and with survival came a responsibility to share what the surface never showed, that beneath even the clearest waters, danger could rise from the depths with no warning at all. The sky above Cape Agulhas was a deep, endless blue, broken only by the hum of rotor blades beating steadily over the southernmost tip of the African continent. Below, the Atlantic churned cold and green, touched by the strong upwelling currents that pushed nutrient-rich water to the surface. In that vast stretch of open sea, a red and white rescue helicopter hovered above a drifting life raft. It was a standard, well-rehearsed, and essential training drill. Inside the cabin, 29-year-old Anton Becker stood ready, a seasoned maritime lifeguard with over a decade of experience in high-risk sea rescues. Anton was known for his precision, strength, and unshakable calm. He'd grown up in the waves of False Bay, raised by fishermen, hardened by surf, and molded into one of the best swimmers on the coast. The signal came. He stepped out, arms tight to his sides, body straight as he dropped cleanly into the sea. The water swallowed him with a splash, sending small ripples outward as the crew above tracked his progress. He surfaced near the raft, already swimming toward it in smooth, efficient strokes. From above, everything appeared normal for the first few seconds. But then, without warning, the sea beneath Anton surged upward in a violent, unnatural swell. A split second later, the ocean seemed to explode. A massive shape burst through the water from below, gray, scarred, and horrifyingly fast. A great white shark, estimated later at nearly 5 meters long, struck with full force. Its jaws clamped across Anton's lower torso just below the ribs, enveloping hips, spine, and muscle in one bite. The force of impact lifted him partly out of the water, limbs flailing as the shark twisted downward, dragging him into the depths in an instant. Blood poured to the surface in wide, pulsing clouds, staining the sea crimson within seconds. The crew above froze, helpless, watching as Anton's legs twitched once, then vanished. A shout cracked across the radio. The helicopter banked hard as two rescue swimmers launched from the side, hitting the water with force and swimming furiously toward the widening pool of blood. But there was no surface struggle, no sign of Anton, just the churn of pink foam and the torn life raft bobbing in the current. Then the shark returned. It breached once more in the distance, gray dorsal fin slicing through the chaos. In its jaws was a limp figure. Anton's body gripped at the waist, his upper torso intact but unmoving, wetsuit torn wide, one arm hanging lifeless. The shark gave a brutal shake, snapping side to side before vanishing again in a burst of foam and spray. Blood followed in a thick line, streaming with the current as the sea seemed to settle around the violence. By the time the rescue swimmers reached the impact site, there was nothing left but the frayed ends of Anton's safety harness, floating pieces of his wetsuit, and a sickening silence. Divers were deployed within the hour. Search crews scanned the coastline and surrounding waters for hours, retrieving only a few fragments of neoprene and one torn fin tangled in kelp. The body was never fully recovered. News traveled quickly through the rescue and maritime community. Anton Becker, one of the most skilled lifeguards in the Western Cape, had been taken in the middle of a training exercise by a single great white shark. No warning, no second chance. It was a clean, calculated hit, typical of the species, but horrifying in its speed and precision. Marine scientists reviewing data from the week confirmed a chilling pattern. Multiple satellite-tagged great whites had been detected in the area around the time of the attack. The sudden cold upwelling off Agulhas had drawn dense schools of fish and triggered a movement of seals along the coast. With that, the predators had followed. Large, mature sharks traveling the same ancient migration route between South Africa and Australia. The drop zone, though clear by protocol, had become a corridor of apex hunters. In response, the Navy and National Sea Rescue Institute suspended all open water drills along the Agulhas coast. Training programs were overhauled to include sonar sweeps, drone flyovers, and predator presence evaluations before any surface entries were made. The risk had always existed, but Anton's death forced a re-evaluation of every assumption. At his memorial, colleagues spoke in hushed tones. Many had trained beside him, worked missions with him, and relied on him during crises. He had saved dozens of lives in his short career, pulling stranded sailors from storms and swimmers from rip currents. That he had died so fast, so violently, and in full view of his team, cut deeper than anyone could explain. The psychological toll rippled outward. Those who saw the strike, the blur of gray, the bloom of blood, the twitch of his legs, couldn't unsee it. One crew member took leave immediately after. Another refused to return to air rescue. The ocean had always demanded respect, but this had been a reminder of something more ancient, something predatory, vast and beyond human control. Anton's name was later etched into the Sea Rescue Memorial in Cape Town, alongside those lost in service. His family, fishermen from Muizenberg, held a quiet ceremony on the shore. They poured a jar of seawater mixed with his favorite black tea into the surf, watching the tide pull it away. The great white that killed him was never seen again, but its presence left a permanent scar on the community. In the end, Anton's story was not about fear, but about the weight of the risk every rescuer accepts. He entered the water to complete a drill, to prepare for the next real emergency, and never returned. The violence of nature had reminded them all once again that even the most controlled environment could be shattered in seconds. Above the drop zone, the sea eventually calmed. The raft was retrieved. The currents shifted. But in every jump after, every second of stillness beneath the blades, those who came after would remember him, and remember what waited below. The fire spread fast. Flames licked across the white fiberglass hull of the Mirabelle, sending oily black smoke into the sky south of the Bahamas. What started as a minor engine issue turned catastrophic in minutes. The three-person crew, Jason Wells, Ethan Rowe, and Marco Delgado, had just enough time to send a distress signal and deploy the emergency raft before abandoning the yacht as it crackled and groaned. Within 20 minutes, the vessel sank beneath the surface, leaving nothing behind but scorched debris and the smell of diesel clinging to the waves. The life raft, bright orange and cramped, bobbed in the empty sea. With no land in sight and their satellite phone waterlogged beyond repair, the three men began their wait. Jason, a 38-year-old deckhand from Florida, had been tossed into the water hard and wore only a half-inflated life jacket, his legs dangling in the deep blue as he held onto the side of the raft. Ethan and Marco were inside, using their shirts to shade their faces against the blazing sun. The hours dragged by. The heat was punishing, their only water supply rationed in small sips. As the day wore on, their skin burned, lips cracked, and hope faded beneath the cloudless sky. Waves slapped at the raft rhythmically, hypnotically, a reminder that they were truly alone. Occasionally, a gull passed overhead or a shadow flickered beneath the surface, but no boat or plane came near. It wasn't until dusk, as the sky dimmed and the water turned steel gray, that the first bump came. At first, they thought it was current, a gentle nudge from below, shifting the raft slightly. Then it came again, stronger, more deliberate. Jason, still floating beside the raft with his arms looped through a rope handle, froze. A long, dark shape glided just beneath his feet, moving with slow, controlled ease. It circled once, twice, then again, staying close, always just out of reach. An oceanic white-tip shark. Its dorsal fin broke the surface briefly. Tall, blunt, and unmistakable. The others saw it too. Marco whispered a prayer. Ethan reached for the small emergency paddle, though it was useless as a weapon. The shark bumped the raft again, testing, turning, returning. Jason clung tighter to the rope, pulling himself closer, but the raft could barely support 3 men inside. He had to stay half submerged, legs numb from hours in the water. Then came the strike. The shark turned abruptly and lunged upward beneath Jason, jaws wide and fast. It clamped onto his left forearm, sinking teeth deep into muscle and bone with brutal force. Jason thrashed, screaming as the animal's weight pulled him under. The pain was instant and white-hot. Blood erupted in thick red clouds around them as the shark twisted once, dragging Jason in a tight, spinning arc before letting go. He broke the surface, gasping, the limb mangled and pouring blood in dark streams that fanned out around him. Ethan reached over the side and grabbed his vest, pulling with everything he had while Marco looped a rope beneath his armpits. Together, they dragged him inside, Jason moaning through clenched teeth as blood pooled at the bottom of the raft. His forearm was shredded, flesh torn in ribbons, tendons exposed, bone visible in places. The hand was twisted unnaturally, with fingers that were limp and lifeless. Marco tore off his shirt and used it to wrap the arm, while Ethan tied a makeshift tourniquet high on the bicep with a length of emergency rope. Jason faded in and out of consciousness as the blood loss took hold. But the shark wasn't done. It continued to circle, bumping the raft every few minutes as night fell. They could hear it in the darkness. Splashes, soft swells, the occasional scrape against the raft's bottom. The moonlight illuminated its silhouette now and then, the broad, torpedo-shaped body gliding beneath them like a shadow waiting for another mistake. No one slept. Jason shivered in the corner of the raft, pale and soaked in sweat. The other two kept watch, scanning the horizon for lights that never came. Hours passed in suffocating silence, the ocean vast and uncaring around them. At dawn, the first faint hum of rotor blades reached their ears. They lit a flare with shaking hands, the red glow cutting through the pale morning light. The rescue chopper circled once, then dropped low. A diver plunged into the sea while the shark vanished beneath the waves, retreating into the deep as help finally arrived. The swimmer reached the raft and secured Jason in a rescue harness, airlifting him first as the others waited. Jason was flown to Nassau, where trauma surgeons worked quickly to save what remained of his arm. The shark had severed tendons, punctured arteries, and crushed bone. While they managed to preserve the limb, he would never regain full use of his hand. He faced months of surgery, rehabilitation, and nerve damage that would permanently alter his strength and mobility. The attack sent ripples through the maritime safety world. Oceanic whitetips were known to be bold, especially around vulnerable prey, but this encounter stood out for its persistence and proximity. A full night spent circling, a single targeted strike. Experts later pointed to the scent of smoke, blood, and human waste from the raft as likely attractants. Jason's story became a case study. It was used in training sessions, naval survival briefings, and maritime emergency courses. Photos of the raft, stained, scorched, and clawed by teeth, circulated among rescue crews. His injury was not the result of poor judgment or recklessness, but a perfect storm. Heat, exhaustion, drifting currents, and one of the ocean's most persistent predators. Jason never returned to sea work. He moved inland, far from the coast, where he could sleep without remembering the feel of the shark's weight pulling him downward, or the dull throb of an arm gone cold from trauma. He knew he was fortunate to have survived, but he would never forget how long the night had felt, or how close the shadow had stayed. The sky above the Belizean coast was a pure, unbroken blue, the kind that promised steady wind and perfect surf. Out past the coral shallows, 33-year-old Carlos Medina carved across the warm, choppy sea on his windsurf board, leaning hard into the gusts that swept through the open water. A local water sports instructor and seasoned surfer, Carlos knew these waters intimately, the tide patterns, the wind shifts, the coral drop-offs. But even in familiar seas, nature held its secrets. That morning had started slowly. Light breezes teased the shoreline, but by mid-afternoon, the wind had strengthened enough to send Carlos out into deeper water. He launched from a narrow beach near Placencia, rigged his sail and coasted through the rolling surface with practiced grace. Out beyond the reef line, the water turned a deeper blue, alive with movement below, though nothing unusual had caught his attention. Carlos had been out for nearly 40 minutes looping through the wind, cutting back across a wide arc when the sea changed. It happened fast, so fast he didn't fully process the shape until it was beside him. A pale, sleek form surged from the shadows below and glided just under the surface, paralleling his board. The animal moved with startling speed and precision, its dorsal fin breaking water for only a moment before dipping beneath again. Carlos caught a flash of yellow-tan skin, blunt snout, and narrow tail, a lemon shark, no more than 6 feet long, but thick-bodied and curious. Before he could react, the shark veered upward in a quick arc. Its head rose just beneath the board, brushing Carlos's leg in a fast grazing sweep. Its teeth made contact, not in a full bite, but in a scraping test. The sting was instant, sharp and hot, like a slice from jagged coral. Carlos gasped and instinctively jerked away, but his sudden shift in balance tipped the sail hard. The board caught a swell sideways, tilted and threw him clean into the water. The fall was disorienting, the splash loud in his ears. As he hit the water, Carlos twisted his body, instinct driving him to protect his limbs, to orient his legs beneath him. He surfaced quickly, his heart racing, his eyes wide, scanning for the shark. The sail floated beside him, rocking in the chop. His thigh burned with pain. The shark was gone. The water had gone still, quiet except for the gentle slap of waves and the faint hum of the wind. Carlos clutched the edge of his board, flipped it over, and hoisted himself back onto it. Blood trickled from his upper thigh, thin but steady, and smeared onto the slick white fiberglass. The wound wasn't deep, but it was raw and open, about 6 inches long, clean in the way that only sharp teeth or metal could slice. Keeping low, Carlos adjusted the sail and began tacking back toward shore, steering with deliberate caution. Every shadow beneath the surface felt suddenly closer, every movement a potential return. Though lemon sharks were rarely aggressive, the encounter had shattered his sense of control. He reached the beach quickly, dismounted and limped toward his supply kit beneath a palm tree. Rinsing the cut with fresh water made him wince, and sand clung to the blood like grit in a wound. He wrapped his thigh in gauze and sat there for a long time, letting the sun dry his skin and calm his breathing. The pain dulled, but the feeling of the shark's body brushing past him, muscle beneath skin, teeth grazing flesh, lingered far longer. Later that day, Carlos reported the encounter to the local marine monitoring center. The details were logged: species, location, time, weather, tide. Lemon sharks, though common in the region, rarely came so close to moving boards. The incident was recorded as a curiosity rather than an aggression, likely the result of movement and reflection from the board drawing the young shark's attention. Still, it was noted. A reminder that even non-threatening species could cause injury when they acted on instinct. Word spread quickly among the water sports community. Carlos's story became a talking point in windsurf shops and among beach instructors. Not because the injury was severe, it wasn't, but because of how quickly a small shark, usually shy and elusive, had changed the tone of a perfect afternoon. It had shown just how little warning even a minor marine incident could offer. One moment of curiosity from an animal, one lapse of attention, and everything could shift. Marine biologists explained that juvenile lemon sharks often explored their surroundings with gentle contact or quick lunges, especially near drop-offs where food debris sometimes accumulated. The surfboard's motion may have mimicked an injured fish or confused the shark in murky light. Either way, the event was rare, but not impossible. Carlos healed quickly, but the scar stayed, a faint line across his right thigh, barely visible after a few weeks, but forever memorable. More than the pain, it was the memory of falling, of flailing in silence, of the unknown just beneath that haunted him most. He returned to the water a few days later. This time his launch was slower, more deliberate. He paused longer before pushing off. His eyes scanned the surface more often, his awareness sharpened. Respect, not fear, now shaped his movements. The ocean hadn't changed, but his relationship to it had. He added a few safety notes to his classes for tourists. He talked about awareness, about looking down, about keeping limbs above water when possible. It wasn't meant to scare anyone, only to remind them that they were guests in a space older and less predictable than anything they knew. Carlos never blamed the shark, It had acted on instinct, drawn in by curiosity. It had tasted, not attacked. But it had reminded him of a truth that every surfer, diver, and swimmer eventually learned. No matter how beautiful the sea, it always holds its own rules. And sometimes even a gentle brush can leave a lasting mark.